all, I just want to thank anybody out there that's been sharing my videos and sharing my content on Reddit or on Facebook or on Twitter or on Pinterest or wherever it is you want to share it on, maybe Google Plus communities or groups on Facebook. Thanks for helping me get my stuff out there, because ultimately I'm just trying to help people understand that they can work with their body in a way that is right for them. And it seems to be a rare teaching nowadays because a lot of people are following that structure, and sometimes that structure is actually breaking them rather than helping them. So thanks a lot for helping me out and helping those people out at the same time. So just so you know, I also provide music services for competitors. So today I'm going to be talking about competitions and stuff. I actually do provide music. Like I can, fade music in, fade it out, and put tracks together and stuff. So if you know anybody that is competing and they need music done, I can do that for them. Just go to my website, naturalgallantbodybuilding.com. So today I just want to start with a gentleman named Eric Wong commented on my YouTube video and said that he noticed that I was in the top percentile of natural bodybuilders, and I had a lot of muscle mass compared to a lot of natural bodybuilders he knows. And I would say to that yeah, I was in the top 5% of professional natural bodybuilding. Anything that was polygraph and lie detector tested as well as urine tested, I was top 5% for sure. Okay, there were some contests I went into at the same time as other contests because I was already in shape, and I said, okay, well, I'll go in this contest and see how I fare. And some of those other contests were only urine tested, and of course, that was a different story. Those guys were, not natural, really, a lot of them, because some of them were really natural and some of them weren't, because those were only urine tested shows, which is why my entire career was based on polygraph testing and urine tested shows. That was the main thing that I competed in, and they'd polygraph test you and ask you if you're lifetime natural on this substance, that substance, like everything or whatever, and you'd have to sit there and answer all these questions as well as take the urine test just in case, you slip through the lower percentile of the polygraph testing, okay? So this is what I competed in for the majority of my career. I competed in around 9 to 10 polygraph tested shows, and those were always interlaced with the other shows I did, just because if I was in shape, I just wanted to get my name out there and to get exposure, because that's the name of the game in the fitness circles. You want to get your name out there, and when your name's out there and you're on a cover of a magazine or you're somewhere, then you can get a sponsorship or an endorsement with a company. Or at least that was my goal at the time. Didn't really happen the same way I wanted it to happen, but at the same time, here I am today on YouTube. So anyway, Eric Wong was asking, I was in the top percentile, and he says, well, how did you put on the muscle mass? How were you so big compared to the natural bodybuilders I know? And the first thing I would say is that I listened to my body and I made this a priority, okay? A lot of people that are bodybuilders out there or fitness enthusiasts, and I just did the video on this, they have a whole bunch of stuff that they're pursuing, and then bodybuilding is kind of like a hobby on the side. Well, bodybuilding for me was my life. My entire identity, everything was wrapped up in it, and everything was centered around training. If I went to the beach that day, I made sure that I was eating enough so that way when I went to the gym later, I would have energy in order to train. A lot of times I would have a nap before I train. People would make fun of me and I have a nap every single day, this kind of stuff. So I made training a priority. So the first thing is I made training a priority. That's the first thing, right off the bat. Everything was centered in my life around my training, okay? Second of all, I wasn't afraid to find the range of motion that was right for me. That was really important. And if somebody was going ass to the grass squats and I found that ass to the grass was hurting my knees or hurting my back, but I wasn't feeling any more muscle tension in my quadriceps, or I wasn't feeling more of a pump, more of a burn, and it was feeling like my joints were taking the beating more, I said, screw it, I'll do the exercise the way I feel it in my muscles, where my joints are taking less mileage, but my muscles are taking more of the beating. And I wasn't afraid to do that. I wasn't afraid to look stupid, right? So other guys were training, they're like looking at me with their, they're doing their one plate aside and going ass to the grass and making fun of me and saying, oh, look at me, I can go all the way to the floor. Look at me, I'm so much better than Jason, right? And then we compare legs after. My legs were about 4 inches around more than theirs were. Well, the reason why is because I wasn't afraid to use heavier weight, but to use the right range of motion, I wasn't afraid to use 4 plates or 5 plates for 90-degree squats, and while they were doing the 1 plate and they're doing it correct, but their joints were taking more of a beating than their muscles were, and their legs were living proof of that. So that's one of the main reasons I basically excelled in natural bodybuilding. That was one of the main reasons. I wasn't afraid to find my way, okay? And your way may be a little different than mine. That's fine, but I'm saying I wasn't afraid to find my way. Second of all, most of the time I stuck to a certain eating program which entailed 1 gram to a little bit more per pound of body weight of protein a day. So 160 pounds, say, of lean mass, say I was 160 to 170, 180 pounds lean mass because I was a 200-pound guy, 210 pounds. I'd be taking in about 2 pounds of meat a day, spread out over 5 to 6 meals. okay? Sometimes it came through cottage cheese, the protein, sometimes it came through just chicken, sometimes it came through fish, but mostly it was low fat, okay? I stayed low fat. I would have only, you know, basically equivalent of a tablespoon or 2 tablespoons of flaxseed oil a day or salmon oil or something like that. But I wasn't taking in fat as my primary fuel source. I've never found that fat is a good thing for me, especially when I'm having carbohydrates. If I want to go low carb, then fat's fine. So I've actually talked about that on this channel a few times. I've actually had lower carb times where I have higher fat and higher protein. And I've experimented with both diets. And in the end, I do find that I have more energy and more of a pump when I have medium to high carbohydrates with protein around 200 grams a day and lower fat, which means, you know, maybe I have a little bit of fat from some red meat or something like that, but I don't have fat in as my major intake. Like, I'm not the guy that puts olive oil all over his salad because olive oil is supposedly good, or putting olive oil in a pan, you know. I don't cook with oils or any of that kind of stuff. So that was the main thing I did with my diet. Okay, that's it. And then on Saturdays and Sundays, then I'd have my cheat meals. I'd eat pizza, or I'd eat whatever it is, bags of chips or whatever I wanted to do, ice cream. And then back on Monday, 5 days a week, I'd stick to eating a certain way, okay? So that's the main thing I did with my diet. Now, when I was getting ready for contest, what I'd have to do is switch my diet around, of course, because now I want to lose some body fat. So I have to skim down some of the energy food, which means lowering the carbohydrates down just a bit, lowering the fats down just a bit, you know, and just making sure you have enough carbohydrates to maintain your muscle mass, but not so much that your body doesn't dip into the fat stores. That takes a little bit of experimentation to find out what's right for you there. Ultimately, my protein would have to go up. When I was dieting for contest, my protein would actually go up about 100 grams a day. So I'd be taking in about 300 grams a day of protein, if not more, because I was replacing some of those carbohydrate meals with protein. And then I was hungry all the time because, you know, lower carbs and cravings and all this kind of stuff. So I had to increase my protein to make up for that. What I would do is I would cut out rice. You know, the first week or two I'd have brown rice for my diet, but then I'd cut rice out and I'd change to oatmeal and potato and yam and sweet potato, because these carbohydrates are a lower glycemic index, so they're more of a stable blood sugar carbohydrate. And the more stable your blood sugar is, the more your body will dip into the fat stores and burn fat, okay? You'll also notice your energy levels are better in the gym because the carbohydrates actually get into the bloodstream and they actually get into the muscle. They don't go to the fat stores as fast. Stuff's getting into your fat stores, it's not really giving you energy, it's just storing. But when energy is getting into your muscle, then it gives you energy, okay? Ultimately, I changed my carbohydrate choices and I lowered the portions. But first, I would eat carbohydrates from morning to night, you know, potato, yam, oatmeal. And then what I would do is start to cut the carbohydrates down to 1 or 2 meals a day. You know, and this would happen gradually over the period of my diet. I would see every week what I look like, and I'd see, okay, am I losing body fat? Am I not losing body fat? I need to be a little leaner somewhere. Okay, this week then I have to cut maybe half of this carbohydrate out at a certain time. So say I have 3 meals of carbohydrates, then maybe I'd cut half the portion out on a 3rd portion, or I'd cut it out altogether, okay? Now the last few weeks before competition, I'd be cutting out yams, potatoes, and starches, except for 1 or 2 days a week. I would just carb load on Wednesday and Thursday, and then what I would do is just switch to 1 carb meal a day in the breakfast time. I would just have half a potato or half a yam, and then I would be having strictly protein and green vegetables for the rest of the day. So that's what I had to do to get ultimately shredded for, say, the Natural Universe. So I had to get shredded for that contest because guys were showing up so lean that I had no choice but to cut the carbs down at some point. And I maintained weight. I didn't actually lower my body weight that much because I was eating an exorbitant amount of food, but my ratios changed. Okay, so that's the main thing that I would do. And actually before contest, a lot of guys were carb loading with potatoes and everything. I never did that. I carb loaded on Wednesday with potatoes and yams, but on Thursday and Friday I was already backing off on the carbohydrates, and then I would just have a little bit of fruit, like say berries or something, and I found that was enough to keep me from flattening out, but at the same time it didn't make me retain water, because starches will make you retain water sometimes, and that's okay in the gym and everything, but when you're on stage you want to be shredding that water out, okay? So the other thing with training I wasn't afraid to do was to switch my rep ranges up and to increase my frequency. I wasn't afraid to do that, where a lot of guys were sticking to their 3-day split, their 4-day split. They're saying, oh no, this is the gospel. You know, this is the gospel. This is the only way to gain muscle mass is 20 sets of biceps or 20 sets of back. And then, because that's the way somebody else does it, so that's the way I gotta train. I was like, screw that. I'm gonna find what works for me. I don't give a shit what works for this other guy that's, you know, unnatural or whatever. I'm gonna do what works for me, and I'm gonna experiment and see what really works. So I'm not just gonna trust what I've read. I'm actually gonna experiment and find out, you know? So I would train for years on end with the 3-day split, and finally I noticed I was just at a plateau. It just wasn't changing. Then I started to experiment with the 2-day split and experiment with that, and at first it didn't seem like my body was responding very well to it, but I tried it for at least 3 weeks just to find out, and then my body started to adapt to it, and then it started to like it. Okay, so it took some time. You know, it wasn't like instantaneous result in anything, and it's just like that natural bodybuilding. Everything takes time, but the fact is I wasn't afraid to change that up. I would be doing high rep days like 15 reps, 20 reps, 25 reps, 30 reps, where as I look at other guys that haven't changed, they're always in the gym doing the 7 rep day or the 10 rep day, and everything's about the 10 reps. Oh, did I get an extra rep since last time? And I found that was just a stupid way to train, because it was kind of like a bird flying into a window. You know, every time you go in the gym, you're like, oh wow, I only got 10 reps. Oh damn, I only got 10 reps. Damn, I only got 10 reps. Well, you know, you're not always gonna go up by 1 rep. You're not always gonna go up by 10% in strength each time you go in the gym, right? But once you up the rep range, you know, going up on 1 rep on a 30 rep set is easier than going up on 1 rep on a 10 rep set. By doing this, it's almost like putting in, you know, just a little minuscule amount more weight on a bar, and then you can actually make small improvements. And then by the time I came to the heavyweight again, I noticed that there was noticeable improvements, because I'll be working different muscle fibers as well. So I'd be giving my fast twitch fibers a rest while I was really pounding the slow twitch fibers to death. And then I would go to a heavy day, of course, which was necessary once in a while to hit those muscle fibers, right? So I was hitting all the different ranges instead of just saying, oh, I'm just going to stick in one range and one type of rep range, and that's what I'm going to get my results from. Adaptation and variation is extremely important, and most people are afraid to do that. They're afraid to adapt and to change according to what the stimulus is being shown to them. Like they've had a plateau for like a year or 6 months, and then they're still sticking to the same way of doing things. And as the old adage goes, you know, if you keep on doing something the same way, you know, nothing's going to change. It's basically the same results going to happen. So you have to not be afraid of change, not be afraid of trying new things, and that will make you a better bodybuilder. And that's what I was able to do. And I noticed a lot of bodybuilders weren't able to do that. Another reason why I achieved high heights in bodybuilding was consistency. I can honestly say that I worked out 6 days a week religiously, and I barely ever missed a day. You know, a lot of people say Sunday's my day off, or Monday's my day off, or I take Wednesdays off every week. I never did that. I just perpetually worked out, and then when life happened and forced me to take a day off, that's when I took the day off. Other people were saying, I'm gonna take a day off and schedule that, where I was saying inevitably life comes in and forces you to take a day off once in a while, so those are the days that I actually use. So I just trained all the time, you know, sometimes 7 days in a row, but then sometimes work or something would come in and force me to take a day off, and then that's when I take my day off. You see? So training was the first priority. I made that the foundation on which everything sat. And that foundation said, eat a certain way, sleep a lot. Make sure you sleep a lot, make sure you have enough rest and recovery that way. And at the same time, don't be playing other sports. I never went out and played hockey when I was in my professional career, because I knew one injury or one misstep or one problem, and that's it. My weight training is gone to the sidelines because of an injury. So ultimately, you can't be trying to be good at everything. You can't try to be a marathon runner and then be a bodybuilder. When you're lifting weights, you're trying to tell your body how to adapt. So you have to be conscious of what information you're giving your body, because that information is going to tell it what to do, right? But if you're running marathons, now that's going to be different information that you're giving the body, and so it's going to get mixed signals. So it's not going to prioritize muscle growth as much so as it would if you're just training, okay? Just lifting weights or doing tension type exercises on the muscle. So I hope this helps you out, and thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you soon.